how we roll, man. Some rock, some win, some 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 win.
Hi, my name is Loris Crow, and we are executing a Showtime. Zig Showtime is the show where members of the Zig community come on stream to share coded ideas with the broader public. Every episode features two speakers who will present and take questions from you, the viewers. Zig Showtime is not just what you're seeing on the live stream, but also the discussions that you can have while watching, and that's why I encourage you to join one of the existing Zig communities that you can find by going to ziglang.org. So, welcome to episode number 9. This is going to be a bit of a peculiar episode because we have only one normal talk, and after that we're going to do something slightly different. It's still going to be shaped like a presentation, but you will see that it's not just about the code, it's a bit more about the community, it's a bit more tied to current events, but I want to try to keep this positive, so I'm actually looking forward for some input from the viewers. And again, as a reminder, I always do the introduction where I try to remind everybody that you can also comment, discuss with people, and even ask questions in the other Z communities, not just on Twitch. So if you are uncomfortable having a Twitch account, or like you just don't want to do it if you don't have one, it's fine. Feel free to discuss this stuff on Discord or on IRC. That said, let's move to the first talk. So let me put the title up. Nice. So if life was a Monopoly game, then Jens would have rolled high enough to go from chemistry to cybersecurity, but without having to lose 3 turns in jail, or as others call it, university. That said, he might still be considered a bit of a bandit, considering that he's already using Zig in production, which is also the title of his presentation. Jens, the stream is yours.
Hello, and thank you for having me. Here's a little about me, if you want to send me fan mail or something after the talk. Anyway, I will start with some words from Andrew himself. Please don't use Zig in production yet. Well, you can't tell me what to do, so my talk will be about how we use Zig in production. So our company develop stuff for embedded systems, and by embedded I mean barely embedded. It's still Linux, so it's developing for these is it's like systems programming, but some limitations. So the architectures used are quirky, usually ARM, but you can't assume it's little endian. You usually have to compile for a lot of different architectures. The memory we can use is limited, because if you're doing normal systems development, you can pretty much assume you have an infinite amount of memory. Like, you shouldn't, but you can. But here you can't, because you will run out and your malloc calls will fail. So you actually need to handle it. Disk space is limited, which means you can't always statically link giant libraries. Anything over a few megabytes is, barely acceptable. These devices also have a limited stuff on them. So maybe we develop something for a set-top box, and it has basically only a BusyBox available. So if you're running a server, you want to see if your clients are connecting to you, well, you could run TCP dump to see if the SYN packets have arrived. But in these devices, you don't have TCP dump, or maybe you want to use Nmap to see if clients you're supposed to talk to are even up. Well, you don't have Nmap, so it's highly limited. Now, the only language until now that you could use in practice was C, because C targets every quirky architecture out there. C programs don't use a ton of memory. C programs are fairly small, and they're really the only programming language you can use in practice that actually cares about out-of-memory situations. Now, it's not perfect. A lot of C libraries just assume that malloc will always work, and they'll just call exit one when it doesn't, or just crash. So you're still limited. But now there is Zig, which it really does what C does in this area, but it actually does it correctly from the start, which is really nice. So I will start with talking about the first project we did, which we used Zig for. We were contacted by a Swedish industrial firm. They had security zones in their factory where you weren't supposed to go to unless you really had to, because there was hazardous material all over the place. And if you had to go there, you shouldn't be 5 people at the same time. It should be just the right amount of people that had to go there. So to solve this, they bought a lot of passage sensors. They're like tiny sensors you mount over your door, and whenever somebody enters the room, they would say, all right, somebody just entered. And when you leave, they would say, somebody just left. All right, very simple. Then they realized they had just bought 100 IoT devices, and IoT devices aren't really known for their excellent security track record. At best, they are developed by the lowest common denominator outsourcing firm. At worst, they are literally Chinese backdoors. So they would, to solve this, they put all their sensors in an isolated network without an internet access at all. Then they asked us to please integrate this isolated network to our security center. Fine, we can. So we added a little ARM computer, like a Raspberry Pi kind of thing. Not exactly a Raspberry Pi, but similar, which had an RS485 connector, which is like an industrial standard for messaging, like a message bus. And over this, we used the Modbus protocol to talk to their security center. The Modbus protocol was written in the 70s and is really old and really crufty. But it has one thing going for it. It is that it's so old that you really cannot hack anything through it. It's basically you get a message, hello, what's your current count? And we say, okay, 7 people have entered the room today. And they say, okay, fine. And then we get a second later another message, what's your current count? And we say 7 again, and so on forever. And the program we were supposed to develop had a lot of things going for it that made Zig a good choice. The first is that it was for a weird ARM architecture, and Zig is really easy to cross-build things. The second thing is that this was basically like a demo. We wanted to see if it worked. So we were just supposed to deliver a binary, basically, check if it's worked at all. So if I had to support this for years, then maybe I would have chosen C instead. But now I could choose Zig because I could kind of forget about it after it was done. So we delivered the binary to them, and it worked. And I've never heard from them. Oh, hell. Okay, now we're coughing here. I delivered the binary to them, and I didn't hear from them again, which is basically a critical success. Because if they had responded more, it would mean there was some bug or something. So I'm pretty happy with that project. Now, since this kind of proved that you could do something with it, we got another request, which was from a Swedish a Swedish like grocery store chain, and they wanted they wanted to have one store open unattended at night without employees. So how that would work is customers would go up to the door, they would verify who they were, the door would open, they would enter the store, they would grab whatever they wanted, they would go to the self checkout and leave. So that's nice. So we were responsible for the door and the sign-in, like not the self checkout. Luckily for us, in Sweden, there is something called Bank ID, which is the Swedish e-identification system, and which is basically a certificate you install on your phone. And you use this to verify who you are. And I checked last night, I checked how many Swedes use this, and the answer is for all adults under the age of 71, 98.8 people of everybody uses it, which is pretty ubiquitous. And I checked out the groups that don't use it. They're basically people who live abroad but still are registered in Sweden, stuff like that. Like really everybody uses it. So how it works, okay, let's say I wanted to verify my identity to Loris. He would send me a QR code and I would scan it with my phone. And I would get a little pop-up saying, hey, the Zig Software Foundation wants to verify your identity, so yes or no. And I would say yes, and I would sign with my password. And Loris would get a call back from the Bank ID server, and they would say, oh yeah, Jens Goldberg just verified. Here's his social security number. And now Americans might say, hold on, it just gives you your social security number. Well, it's not that secret in Sweden. You could it's pretty much Googleable for everybody. I could check my friend's social security numbers just in 10 minutes, basically. So it's not that big of a deal. In any case, our first idea was, okay, let's just print the QR code on a piece of paper and staple it to the wall next to the door. Like super easy. That turned out to not work because every QR code is used for an unique transaction. So we needed a monitor. So we hooked a monitor to our little ARM computer. And if I had an infinite amount of time, I would have used KMSDRM, which is like the hardcore Linux low level, how you put pixels on the screen on a modern Linux. But I did not have an infinite amount of time. So I used SDL. And to control the door, they had a REST API, so I just used curl. And that was basically it. And then we launched it, and it ran for a few months. And I'm happy to say we had 0 bugs, which I was pretty proud of. And our system was featured in the Swedish state television, local news for Värmland, which is not exactly a metropolis, but pretty cool. So I was happy with that. Note that the 2 projects we did were either limited in time or just a one-off. So now we have a 3rd project, which is actually a real big thing, in that we were approached by a Swedish public transport firm. They have these devices which count the amount of people entering on buses. So the reason you want that is obviously because you want to know if some route is overcrowded, or if nobody uses a bus stop, maybe we should move it, stuff like that. Also, a lot of municipalities in Sweden and in Northern Europe, they subsidize public transport. So every time somebody enters a bus, the public transport company gets some cash. So they are really interested in having a super accurate count of people, because as long as it doesn't work, they're instantly losing a ton of money. And they asked a lot of companies, and they saw this beautiful device you can see to your right, and their solution was either to install a server on the bus itself that you would use to communicate with this, which is not really realistic, or they looked at installing their software on the device and then gave up screaming after 10 minutes when they discovered how ancient it is. It is an ARM7. It is pre-millennial. That is, this was fabbed before 9/11. So basically nothing works. There is a really tiny amount of memory. And I got it, and I said, all right, let's try SIG. Let's try target ARM. Let's specify the architecture as this specific architecture, and wouldn't you know it, it just worked. I was really happy with that. Now, of course, there were a ton of other problems. The first one was integrating with account itself. They had a lot of ways of doing that. Like 80% of them were useless because they didn't give us real live data. They just gave us counts during the last 10 minutes kind of things, and we have to discard that instantly. The second choice, or the first choice was IBIS, which was apparently some German Deutsche Bahn integration thing. And it sounded promising. You'd send a UDP packet to a specific port, you'd get a count back. All right, fine. Then I tried to find documentation, and I found some. They were all very corporate-ese, with no practical information, and it was all in German. So I wasted like a day on that. Then I gave up. Then they had another really weird way of getting the data, is that you specify an IP and a port in a configuration file, and the device would send you an XML every time somebody entered, which is okay. I can deal with that. I don't want to parse XML, but I can deal with it, you know. However, we found out that on some buses, another third-party company had already used this feature. So we couldn't just, and it only supported one target. So we couldn't just boot them out or anything. Like, we couldn't destroy their business. So we were left with nothing, basically. So my last-ditch attempt was to write a SIG program that opened a raw socket on loopback. I dumped every packet on loopback to a file. And I opened that file in Wireshark, and I could see how the internal IBIS daemon communicated with their internal counting daemon. And fine, I could pretend to be the IBIS daemon. Like, I don't know how the protocol works. It's some corporation-specific protocol. So I could see that they sent like 8 bytes, random bytes, which I have no idea what they mean, as a handshake. So okay, fine, I'll send those too. And I got a handshake back. And then I started getting events, and I could kind of quickly see how the events were shaped. Like, this has to be the size of the event. This has to be the ID of the event. Most of them, I have no idea what they mean. But one of them I could see, okay, this has to be the count out and count in. So I just pretend I am their internal IBIS daemon. I discard every event I don't understand. I just take the count, and it works. And then we got a much newer device from a few years ago, and I tried my hack daemon on the newer device, and that worked as well. So I'm kind of confident that this solution will work. Well, fingers crossed, it will. Anyway, with this information, we were supposed to send it to an MQTT broker, and that is basically a message protocol. You send. They wanted like a JSON. How many people exited this door during the stop? So I construct one and I send it away, and that's it. Another issue with this is that it does not have a battery, so it always boots in 1970, and after it boots, it doesn't get internet for a while because the 3G router takes a while to boot. And I don't want to miss the first stop because I need the current date to send to MQTT. So what I do, I discovered that the buses had a GPS on board, and a GPS always needs very accurate time. So I just asked the GPS, hey, what's your current position? And it also gives me their internal time. So fine. The first thing I do is ask the GPS, what's your position? Take the time, set the system clock, and I'm done. So I'm currently working on this project right now, and there's like 1 day maybe left till we send a demo. So, but I'm pretty happy how it turned out. Now,
Jens, sorry for
yeah,
interrupting
sure.
you. Are you still in on the passenger counting slide, or did you move forward?
I am still on the slide.
Okay, just double checking
will-
since it was
Yeah,
Firefox.
sorry.
No, no worries. No worries.
I will, I will go to the next slide right now. Okay.
Nice.
Why are we using Zig and not C? Okay. First of all, we are targeting a ton of different weird architectures. And you can do that with C. You just have to make your own C toolchain. That is a giant pain in the ass. Because let's say I want to parse JSONs. Then you need like libJSON maybe. Then you need to compile that for your weird ass architecture. And then you have like a collection of libraries. And when you get a new architecture, you have to build a new GCC, a new everything, and then all your libraries. And like you can kind of assume that some of these, 1 or 2 of these libraries will fail to compile on this new weird architecture you're supposed to target. Like it always happens. There's a giant pain. It takes ages, and it takes a lot of effort. With Zig, I can just, instead of wasting a day, I waste 10 seconds because I can just target the exact CPU and it just works, which is literally unparalleled. The second thing is performance, and with performance, I mean code size as well, and how much memory it wastes. And if your binary is small enough and efficient enough, it unlocks opportunities to simplify your entire architecture. For example, in one of our devices, it was partitioned in such a way that the system files had their own partition, and it was sized so it was exactly the size it needed, plus a little extra space. So if we had used something with creates very bloated binaries like Go, we would have to put it on the log partition maybe, and then create like a soft link from user bin, like horrible hack or something. In Zig, the binaries are like 20 kilobytes. So we can squeeze it in wherever we want, basically. If your binary is fast enough, you can. If you have a slow program, maybe you want to host it in the cloud, and it's too slow or doesn't scale, so you need to put it on like 7 servers, and you need some sort of load balancer, and it's just a giant pain. But we don't need to, because it will always use 0.1% of CPU, whatever we do. And we don't need to put them in like Docker containers or anything, because it has no user space dependencies, which is extremely nice, because if you depend on user space, you can never be quite sure that your program will work after you've updated your system. You can never be quite sure that it will work on this new system, because maybe this new system has a slightly older version of glibc, and then it fails to start, and it's terrible. We get emails from customers who want a list of our requirements, and the only thing we have to answer is we want a Linux kernel that's been updated the last 15 years. That's it. So this real annoying email chain when we specify exactly what we need, we can just ignore it. It's really, really nice. The fourth benefit is that the Zig library has a lot of nice features which the C library does not. Which, for example, parsing JSON. It's every time you have to add a library, you add pain because it will break. It will be issues with linking. It will be issues with dependencies. It will be just a ton of annoying issues. We wanted to create like a checksum, so we needed SHA-1. And so what do? You link OpenSSL, and you're in a world of pain. In Zig, you have SHA-1 in the standard library, and it just works. And it's so nice, so convenient. Now I know Zig's, we have not yet decided on how bloated our standard library is actually going to be. So maybe it won't have cryptographic functions in the future, but they're there now and they're very nice. So I like that. A fifth point is that I feel that Zig is a lot more dependable than C. And that's not just, it's not that I have less buffer overflows, because I don't really have buffer overflows that much. It's that Zig, the logic of the Zig program is easier to, it's clearer, and it's easier to see what's going on. And that's mostly because the defer and error defer are really, really nice to have. Because error handling in C is a giant pain, and it creates a lot of terrible spaghetti code. So when I run a Zig binary, I sleep sounder at night. I don't really have any hard data or anything that it works, but it feels that way, and it's very relevant to me anyway. Now, Zig isn't perfect, obviously. There are issues, and there are issues which we share with everybody, and that's things like documentation. Now, I didn't add this here because like every Zig programmer has the same problem. It's not really specific for Zig in production. Now, it's not that bad because you can just look for, I usually look at tests in the standard library on GitHub, and that works quite well. But obviously could be better. It's really hard, I know, because if you change something you might have written a lot of documentation for, you just wasted a lot of effort. Now, what is a problem for us is that the compiler and standard library obviously updates. Like we can't really expect anything else because the language isn't done. So, but still, if you compile something, if you make software, and then half a year later the customer says, "Hey, we want an update," then okay, you got to spend some time getting your code compiling again. Now, this isn't really a problem, that big of a problem, because the changes aren't that huge. I fixed our unmanned store program, and it took like 20 minutes. The var args had been removed, so I had to fix the print statements. JSON had changed a bit. It's like 20, 30 minutes. It's not a big deal, really. And some things, when they change, Zig format takes care of it for you. Like when the way you specified you wanted C linking on external symbols, they changed that, the format. But I didn't have to do anything because the Zig formatter just rewrote it for me. So I'm pretty happy with that. The second giant annoyance is that the Zig does not have a built-in date support. I know there is a third-party library for this, but the problem is with third-party libraries right now is that they have the same problem with updates to the compiler. So if you run the latest compiler, your date library will start failing, and you have to fix that too. It's kind of annoying. The reason we need this is because we do a lot of integrations with a lot of stupid protocols, and protocols love having weird ass date formats, which we need to convert. And if you develop something new, like a hobby, you probably don't do. You won't run into all these dates all the time. Okay, so that is, I think, it. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's switch to the Q&A view then. There we go. Okay. Is that a blank slide?
That is a blank slide, yeah.
Okay. Sorry for double for asking you about everything, also for interrupting earlier. But so just to give you a little bit of feedback, in the end, Firefox kinda behaved itself, but at one point it did go to black, and I had to like reload the page on my side. Not a big deal. It was only a moment, so don't worry.
Right.
But that's why then we were all a bit suspicious of Laplace. It's annoying.
I see.
Okay, thank you very much. So you have a ton of projects that are using Zig in production then.
This was the 3 projects I mentioned. We actually have 2 more with theirs tiny, and it would have run out of time, basically.
I see. So while people think about questions, there was one earlier that I want to ask you. I wasn't tagged in it, but I'm going to ask you anyway. But before that, first, let me start with the usual question. How did you discover Zig, and when was that?
I think it was like, I know exactly when it was. I saw the Road to Zig talk by Andrew Kelly. That's it.
And it radicalized you.
It radicalized me, yeah. It's like one of those ISIS recruitment videos.
Of course. So another question from me. You mentioned MQTT earlier. Do you have an opinion on MQTT versus zero message or zero MQ or nano message?
I only really know MQTT.
I see.
MQTT is, I think it's fine. It's simple enough that using a library, you don't have to use a library. It's like you open a socket, you write a struct, here is my handshake. You get a handshake back, and you start using it, basically. Like learning a library is not really worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that.
Okay. So, so let me repeat the question. This question arrived immediately while you were presenting, and it's from Alex Nask, so might not be. He wasn't super serious, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. So you mentioned you can use C to do the type of embedded work that you do, but then you wanted to try Zig, and of course Alex asked the standard question that was in everybody's mind: why not Rust?
Because, okay, I've tried Rust, and I like to recompile my software all the time. Like do some edit, see if it works. And I built like a hello world, and it was abysmally slow, like ridiculous. So I said, okay, fuck this, and I deleted the compiler. That's it. Also, I don't think Rust cares about memory allocation failures. I'm not sure. I could be wrong. Could have fixed it, but I think they just crash, and I can't have that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, by the way, you know what you could do in the meantime? I have a couple of questions. So can you maybe go to the first slide where you are presenting yourself? I think that would be, so we can leave your contact info down there. Yeah. I
think. If you want to send me hate mail or anything, that's fine.
Okay, so one question from Firefox. So aren't you worried that the Z code generation isn't stable or good enough?
That actually happened with packed structs. And then, yeah, that can happen, I suppose. It did happen with packed structs, but as long as I ignore that, I have not seen anything out of anything weird.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually write tests and stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so through testing,
I'm not,
you're able to
not
catch.
overly concerned.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. I'm sure you're not the first person to have been burned, and nor the last by extracts. So we probably need to take a look at that system.
I mean, you should just disable it until it works. Like right now, it's basically a landmine.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. That's a good point. I think Andrew is sleeping now. He's on the wrong side of the ocean, so or I would say he's on the wrong side of the land, the one facing the wrong ocean, quote unquote. But I'm sure he's gonna take a look when he wakes up, and we'll see what he has to say. But yeah, I think that's something that it's worth checking after self-hosted is up and running. Next question. This one is from Nipsey. So, are all production? So all the projects used in production static? Are they ever updated?
The first one is static. We don't have. It had to be static because the network is entirely isolated. And okay, let's say there's a bug, and we would need to update. It's going to be really annoying going out to every factory and plugging and switching SD cards on every device everywhere. It's like really annoying. So it has to be static. Like it doesn't have internet connection or anything. So yes. For the unattended store thing, that was temporary. So that's over. So we do update it, but not anymore.
Mm-hmm. I see. Well, it makes sense. I mean, if the company is not paying for a support thing or whatever, if there's no extra development to be done, you're done, and that's it. That's actually, now that I think about it, one of the beauties of giving out binaries. I mean, we do give out the source code too. Like here's a zip file. Not that anybody ever reads it, but you know, looks nice. Part of the documentation. It's like next to the diagrams and stuff.
Here's some grossly outdated Zig code. Enjoy.
Well, you can sell it as a like pseudocode or something.
It's nice. But it does take like 20 minutes for me to fix it, like to make it modern Zig if I wanted to. It's not a big deal.
Okay, let me see if there's any questions outside of Twitch, like people in Discord. No, people in Discord are just passing around clips about you complaining about Rust. IRC is fine too. Okay, so I think we went through most of the questions. I'm actually looking forward to knowing more about the other projects once they complete and you give out a binary blob, a surprise binary blob to the customer.
Now we'll actually maintain it too. So we have a little tunnel to every device over the internet. So if we wanted to update, I can just press a button and it will update every binary.
I see.
That's very convenient.
Yeah. So in the end, you had, I guess, mostly good time. I mean, could be worse. Still not perfect, but we're getting there, and it's doable. To be honest, while maybe generally speaking, it's a bit early to use Zig in production. I think you got one point super right, and I really share that opinion, and that is if your point is just to create one binary and you have it and it works, you're done. It's fine. I actually had the same, so it's not really maybe it's not the same degree of production as you, but in my case, and maybe I'll talk about this a little bit later on my own side of the show, but I have a library on GitHub which implements a data structure, cuckoo filters, and it's compiled, it's there. And you download the release and it works and it does what it needs to do. And it's like 200 lines, so it's something very basic. But that's kind of the point. It's nice to have software that at one point you can consider completed, and once it's completed, yeah, maybe in the future there will be another architecture that you might want to compile it for, but at least it's, yeah.
And I mean, if the customer tells us, hey, he wants a new feature, you get paid. It's development.
Makes total sense. So thank you very much. Is there anything, any final words?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, then thank you very much, Jens. It's been a great
you.
pleasure. I'm looking forward to more talks from you about production, maybe other topics too. Up to you.
I may. All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay, so now it's the break, and once we're done with the break, there's going to be a second quote-unquote talk from me about community stuff, bit of a Q&A, and then we are done for today's show. So let's do the 10-minute break. See you on the other side. Okay, I hope everybody had a good break. I think it's time to resume. So let me get ready. I need to find something on my phone for later. Okay, let's put it here. So, the Zig Pie, how to have your cake and eat it too. Well, so there's one point that I think we tried to make also during the fundraiser. I think we did a reasonably good job at making it, but I think it's a good time also to restate it again. And before I get there, I want also to share a little bit of my personal ideas about this stuff. Actually, my personal experience, so that I don't know, just to make myself understood a little bit better, I guess. So let me select the slides. Okay. So my Zig story. Let's see. I never really cared much about systems programming. I'm a bioinformatician. I think of myself as a computer scientist, not a computer engineer. I do write software engineer on my CV, like everybody does, but I don't consider myself an engineer in reality. That said, I also think that when it comes to computer science, I love computer science, but I also think that computer science, it's not just theory. So even though I never really spent too much time thinking about systems programming and the more engineeristic part of computer science, I still think you have to have a well-rounded experience. Like you have to have different experiences to be able to be a well-rounded professional, or in my case, a well-rounded scientist. Computer science is theory, yes, but it's also practice. It's having the machine work well, but it's also product design and even psychology to some degree. So if you are able to make the machine do work precisely, but then what you're creating is not usable for humans, then what's the point? I mean, maybe you do it for your own self-enjoyment, but you get the point, right? Machines are here to help us achieve stuff. So computer science is at the crossroad of many things. And again, I say computer science because that's what I'm used to saying. Maybe in English, in other languages, you would say something different. Also, small tangent, but another interesting thing is that I think computer science is probably the worst way of describing this field. In Italian, and I think in a few other languages, we use a different term, which is also present in English. I don't understand why we use computer science though. So in Italian, we say informatica, which you also say in English. When you say, for example, bioinformatics, you say informatics, right? That's the same word. And the idea is that you are working on automated processes that deal with information. And so it's not just computer, it's also something else. But anyway, rant over. So while I'm super weak when it comes to systems programming and all this stuff, I like the idea of learning more still. So my first encounter, so in university, for example, I did write a little bit of C, maybe even a little bit of C++. I'm not going to admit to it in the future, but yeah, I might have, and for some courses, but I never done it seriously. So this was my first time. I was working, doing consultancy, and I needed to have a data structure and cuckoo filters in particular. And I wanted to have them loaded in a Redis server. And Redis has this module system where you can load dynamic libraries and use them to implement new commands. And so I created my commands with my data structure written in C and everything else. The screenshot that you see here is a comment that at one point I left in there because I wanted to deal with different data types, or more precisely fingerprints, which are one of the things that you have to deal with when doing cuckoo filters. Can be 1 or 2 or 4 bytes. These are the common values. There's also other options, but anyway, this is what I was dealing with. And I wanted to have like specialized functions, but at the same time, I didn't want to copy paste the same code multiple times because I was still working on the stuff. So I did what people that don't know how to program in C do, abuse macros. So this was my one macro that I wrote that would basically produce the same function for the 3 different fingerprint sizes. And there are also other settings in there, like the size of a bucket, but you don't care about this stuff. The point is, I was starting to add multiple stuff like this. And if you remember from the previous slide, all right, I got to a point where I started considering my source code a macro nightmare. So this might seem tame to some of you, but I didn't stop here. This was just the beginning. Like, look at this. Again, not super complicated, but I think this is not good. Like, in hindsight, actually, I knew that already while I was writing it, but this is not good. Look at the extra parameter. Look what I do with that. There's one argument to where I call the macro function, where I'm passing in a bunch of partial C syntax that then gets copy-pasted in the right place in the source code. Not nice, not nice. But anyway, I was learning stuff, and this was also the time where all the vulnerabilities were coming out about Intel CPUs, and well, not only Intel's, but also all 64, and I wanted to play with it here that I didn't want to have one single. So I could have written all this stuff without having without caring about the size of each fingerprint. Just put the value in a wider variable, and then have a bunch of ifs inside. But I didn't want to have branching, because unnecessary branching, because I was reading that branching is bad. So anyway, point is, I was experimenting, I was learning, right? So I'm not claiming that necessarily this is what you should do, or that it was right. Clearly, this is not what you should do. But I'm not even claiming that what I was trying to attempt is something that you should attempt professionally. So it was partially a professional thing, partially a learning thing. And anyway, that's where I got myself into. Not a good place. Not a good place at all. But then I found Zig and I rewrote it. I'm not showing you the code, but it's so nice. It was nice. Actually, also the Zig code might not be perfect Zig code. I also tried at that point, I wanted to try to make it the whole implementation small. So I kind of tried to collapse a few functions together. I think it didn't. It's not bad. I think it's reasonable. Maybe not the. I wouldn't use that code to learn about cuckoo filters, but it's not a bad implementation. And I was making use of all the features that Zig had that I didn't have with C. The most important of which was compile time parameters, because with compile time I was able to do the macro thing that I was trying to achieve, but in an even nicer way than you would be able to with normal generics. So I was super happy with Zig, because it basically allowed me to learn systems programming in a much more efficient way than C. And I'm talking about the source code, but I mean, at one point in time, I think I knew how to read and write makefiles. Now I forgot. It's like, it has a declarative syntax. Everything is weird. I don't care. I used it once, I think, for a while. Then I didn't look at it anymore, and everything fell out. I don't remember about anything about it anymore. So no makefiles, no nice errors, not just a seg fault thrown at my face. And also safety that warns me when I'm doing weird stuff. Another interesting thing is that originally this library, when it was written in C, I did not trust any of the C isms that I was using. So I ended up writing a Python implementation that was super slow, but also super explicit. And what I would do was, I had a testing routine that would basically run the same operation in the C implementation and in the Python implementation. Then I would compare every single byte inside the memory slice that inside the data structure between the two versions, and I would make sure that they would always be the same. They would always agree. I also did that because cuckoo filters are a randomized data structure, so it's hard to know. It's hard to write a unit test that really makes sure that everything makes sense, because stuff gets moved around. It's a bit complicated, but I trusted the Python code because it was simpler, it was easier. And so by trusting that and seeing that both would behave the same way by having them do the same operations in lockstep, I ended up trusting my code enough to be able to to sleep. Anyway, I wrote the Zig version and I threw away the Python version. I don't need it anymore. Now I can trust what I'm doing with Zig because everything makes sense. So I had a great time with Zig when I started, and I did that because I got interested in Zig because of my personal interests. So I'm sure that's not only me, also other people are in the same situation. Then I wrote OK Redis. So by this time I started working for Redis Labs. So in the first job, I was just doing consultancy stuff for a fintech startup. But after that, I joined Redis Labs. So I was doing more Redis-oriented stuff. And we had discussions about how clients should be done. And of course, people have different ideas. Not always the best of, not always good taste, I would say. But anyway, this is when I decided to try and write OK Redis, and it was such a nice experience. OK Redis, I think it's a very nice idea for a Redis client. I have to fix it. It's been stuck. I haven't pulled Zig for a while since I wrote that piece of code. I mean, that piece of code is basically tied to a fairly old master commit, so it's not going to compile anymore. But there are some very nice things that you can do with Zig. When it comes to API design, I like so much that I can have in one client, have it both work for async code and for blocking code, for async IO and for blocking IO modes. That's so nice. This doesn't happen in any other Redis client out there. Every single other Redis client, it's either the async version or the blocking version. You can't have two in one. Another nice thing is that this client, you can use it without and have it do 0 dynamic allocations. So if you know what you're going to expect from Redis, you can use stack allocated memory, and you don't even need a buffer. Like, everything can be precise. It's so nice. It's really, really, really nice. So that also was a very positive thing. Next, I started Showtime. So again, talking about my experience, I was working at Redis Labs. COVID had started. Everything was becoming awful, and if you are in developer advocacy, you do a lot of conferences and events, and there were no more events, and all the events that still were there were virtual events done in super crappy ways, like on Zoom, last minute. Like COVID has just exploded, right? So everybody was unprepared. And if you read on my blog, I don't like those. I have opinions, and so I wanted to write this stuff with Showtime. Now, is Showtime perfect? Probably not. Definitely not. But there was also another interesting thing. So you can see how I'm starting to move now from using Zig just to learn stuff and to improve my knowledge, to something different. Now, Zig kinda started tying into what was my daily job outside of strictly programming. And Firefox is saying you forgot the Twitch streams in between Showtime and OK Redis. Yeah, that's true. I did a bunch of streaming. Well, I wanted to try out doing Twitch streaming before I started advocating for it internally in Redis Labs. So yeah, I did also that. I also, this is another minor thing, but I also started at one point rewriting in Zig a radix tree library written in C by Antirez. That also was so much fun. I'm not done yet. It's still a work in progress, but I learned a lot, and I think I discovered a couple of improvements that the C code could have, maybe. But anyway, that's a story for another day. So that was also nice. But the point is, we're starting. I'm personally starting to see Zig not just as something useful for me strictly when doing programming, but also for other things. I mean, I'm running Showtime. I'm getting Twitch Primes. By the way, if you have a Twitch Prime, this would be a nice moment to drop it. But like the money for that goes to me. Like the channel is mine. Every time I get a new follower, that's my follower. So that's nice. I have a YouTube channel, and I'm starting to do stuff around Zig. I also wrote blog posts that also helped me earlier. So let's move forward. Yeah, I mentioned the YouTube channel. I'm halfway through to be able to enable monetization. I want to enable monetization. My point is, I'm not here as some kind of missionary or some kind of like priest or something. I'm here to make myself happy, and I think that we all can enjoy from us doing this kind of thing. So oh yeah, we now have a newsletter for Zig Showtime. If you didn't check it out yet, this was the description I left for today's talk by Jens. And yeah, as you can see, the jokes get a bit more edgy on the newsletter than they do on the show, if you care to read that. So we are now finally approaching the point that I want to make. Oh yeah, and also then I joined as VP of Community at the Zig Software Foundation, and the idea again is that I'm being paid to do this job, and while maybe I could get a better pay if I were to do, I don't know, some interview prepping, relearn how to implement by heart a FizzBuzz or some other stupid shit like that, maybe I could get a better salary. But this is so nice. And well, in my case, I think it also ended up tying nicely with my experience doing developer advocacy stuff, because in the end it's a communication, it's a mixed technical and communication role, right? I think you saw the communication part in the recent statement. Anyway, point is, there is a gigantic amount of potential around Zig right now, like a stupid amount. And I think we all, if us here on the stream, we know this already. I feel like I knew this the moment I saw comp time, to be honest. But today we can say, I think we all know this. And since there is so much potential, I think this is a nice moment for people that are in a situation where they have the opportunity of taking the initiative to try and do something around Zig, not necessarily for altruism, not to be a martyr, but for yourself. And I think that we all as a community would benefit from more people trying to do things for themselves. Now, of course, there are ways and ways to do things for yourself, right? Again, if you read the recent stuff, you would know there are definitely wrong ways to do that. But since there is so much potential, there is so much space for you to do something that ends up making you better off and everybody else in the community, all right? Create some value, capture a fraction. Andrew likes to say that it's not a sum zero game. I guess that's one way of putting it. From my personal point of view, there is so much abundance that you don't have to think about it from a competitive standpoint. It's just a matter of doing more. I guess the only point is don't be an asshole, which is a very generic statement, of course. You would want to have something more precise that states what should be allowed, what should not be allowed, but you can see it starting from the license. The license is extremely permissive. And again, if you read that statement, you saw that we, as me personally, but I think also the Zig Software Foundation and Andrew, nobody has anything against forks, for example, of Zig. The point is, there are ways and ways to do it, right? And we never complained about the forking itself. And I'm sure that there are so many things that you can do that basically lets you have some of the cake, but also some of the pie, I guess, but also make the whole pie larger. So I think this is a very amazing opportunity. It's a very amazing point in time. Think about it. You've seen, I don't know, like I remember I'm from 1990. So I remember most programming languages already be out there when I got to an age where I would be able to do something. So Now, if you check out, I don't know, Python, there's a ton of Python websites, blogs, tutorials, books, and stuff. Everything seems to be already out there. Of course, there's still space for new stuff. But when something is new, it's so exciting. It's amazing. So try to enjoy yourself doing this stuff. Like, if you are in a situation where you can try to take an initiative, do it. I'm sure you're going to enjoy yourself. I'm not advocating, by the way, to like leave your job and start writing and start a Zig YouTube channel. It might be a bit too early, but you can do stuff on the side, I think, like I started. Some examples: Zig Learn from Soapstone. That's an amazing website that contains a bunch of important stuff to learn Zig, and I would be happy if he one day would be able to, well, complete the chapters first, since most of them still have a bunch of to-dos at the end, but it's fine. But I would be super happy if he would be able to make some money out of this. I think everybody would be happy. That would be so amazing. Other things that you can do. Learn Zig. I guess that's the starting point, right? You kind of have to learn Zig before you can do something else. And that alone is already good, because then it allows you to use it professionally. So that's one starting point. Write blog posts. That's nice. Helps if you want to have some kind of public presence, which, by the way, I understand perfectly if you don't. But if you do, it helps. It helps with finding sometimes higher profile jobs even. And it also helps people that don't know much about Zig to learn more about Zig. I mean, people might not want to tune in into a small Twitch show, or they might not want to watch a 2-hour-long video from Andrew about compiler internals on YouTube if they don't know anything about Zig, but they might be interested in an introductory post about stuff or small details of Zig. Make YouTube videos, start a Zig podcast. We don't have any podcast for now. Write a Zig book. Yeah, Zig book when, says Firefox. Yeah, good question. I'm asking that myself too. And actually, there should be more Zig books, not just one. I personally want to write one about comp time. I think I liked comp time so much, and I think I like it's one of the things in Zig that really clicked into my mind right off the bat. Like the moment I saw it, it's like, yeah, that's how it was always supposed to be. So yeah, I want to write a comp time Zig book. Start another Twitch show. Please start another Twitch show. I would love to have another Twitch show that I could go and give talks to, or give talks at. Follow Benjamin on Twitch and other Twitch streamers. By the way, if you are not in the Discord server, there's a showcase and a showcase stream text channels where people put links to interesting stuff that they do, and the Twitch streams are nice. Benjamin is a regular, but I think he's not the only one, so that's another one. Maybe prepare to use Zig in production, or I don't know, you want to YOLO it, but don't, I mean, be careful. So what else is there? I don't know. There are, I think, many other things that you can do that maybe I'm not even thinking about that might end up being enjoyable, profitable for you, and also help enrich the community. I mean, that's the starting point of human collaboration, I guess. It sounds so weird in this global economy that we find ourselves in. You kind of take it for granted that somewhere, somehow, there's somebody creating services for you, but it's not taken. You should not take it for granted. You know, I think that people that really have a renewed appreciation for this stuff are people playing Minecraft. If you play Minecraft, you realize that if you have other people in your server that are building stuff, it's so nice because you look at what they are doing. While if you're just in a server by yourself or with people that are not doing anything, like you can see the difference. I don't know if anybody watches Twitch. I was watching recently Moon. Well, recently, I think it was like a couple of months ago by now. But anyway, Moon was playing some roleplay Minecraft. It was so funny, and I think I really learned a lot by watching this weird Minecraft stream. Anyway, point being, there's a quote that I think captures what I'm trying to say perfectly. Like if we go back to the idea that the Zig community, the Zig ecosystem is in a way a Zig Pie. So let me read it from my phone. So it's a piece of cake to bake a pretty cake. If the way is hazy, you gotta do the cooking by the book. You know you can't be lazy. Never use a messy recipe. The cake will end up crazy. If you do the cooking by the book, then you'll have a cake. I think Lazy Town had it right all along. Don't be lazy, do the cooking by the book. Anyway, so that was the end. I don't want to, how can I say? I don't want to press the issue too much in detail. I think there is so much space for people to bring in also their own point of view over things. And I just hope that, more people add more stuff to the pot. I don't think you can have too many cooks when it comes to communities around something so big as a programming language. So yeah, let's do questions or comments, actually, not just questions, but comments. If anybody has anything that they want to say, I'll be happy to read your message on stream and leave it for the future in the YouTube channel forever and ever. But yeah, so, okay, Firefox is saying that, oh, he left a question, but he said I already answered it. Let's see. Let's see. First question, how did you discover Zig? Yeah, I answered this. So the precise moment when I discovered Zig, let me think about it. It wasn't the video by Andrew. I think it was before he released that video. Not much before, but still before. So I discovered Zig around version 0.3. I think it was either just being, yeah, I think it was just released or close to. I think I stumbled upon it either on Hacker News. I probably stumbled upon it on Hacker News. That would be my guess. Yeah, I know it was just a joke. No, don't worry. I actually think it's reasonable. So, is there a roadmap for Zig 1.0? Yes and no. So, the yes part of the question is, the yes part of the answer is that there is a plan for the next, like, big stones, major steps that we need to do to move forward. So, for example, the current one is the self-hosted compiler. The main problem is, I guess to some degree, Zig exists because Andrew did not want to write C++ code at OkCupid. Maybe he won't agree to that statement precisely, but it's a reasonable guess. Anyway, so the stage 1 compiler is written in C++. And for many reasons, the architecture seems not to be perfect. In good part because the language evolved over time, so all the assumptions weren't true anymore, and so you would need to do some refactoring, but that never happened, partially also because I guess the plan all along was to eventually move to a self-hosted compiler, which is what is happening now. So with the C++ version, I think there's a bunch of bugs that it's not easy to solve. Self-hosted is being engineered from scratch, right, from the ground up. So the idea would be that once we have stage 1 working, then it will be easier to fix stuff like packed structs, which seem to be something that is kind of hard to get right using the stage 1 compiler, the C++ one. So step 1, get self-hosted up and running. With self-hosted up and running, then some more other opportunities open. From my point of view, for example, as VP of community, from a non-strictly technical point of view, I agreed with Andrew that once we have self-hosted working and we can feel more comfortable fixing certain types of bugs, we want to start thinking of a Zig stability program. And like that's the name, the Zig stability program. The idea of the Zig stability program is that we want to make Zig more compelling for production use cases. but at the same time, we are not yet at 1.0 version, right? So the idea would be to offer a stability guarantee around features in terms of bugs, but not in terms of APIs. So the idea would be that we release, let's say that the self-hosted compiler is completed by version 0.8 of Zig. Let's hope so. Sorry, my phone is noises. Mute. Okay. So we have the self-hosted compiler up and running for version 0.8. That would be amazing. At that point, what we can do is say, okay, now we want to fix package structs, and we want people to depend on package structs. They can trust that package structs won't break. So we make sure that we don't break those. But if a bug shows up, we fix it and we release version 0.8.1. So we release we do a tagged release also for bug fixes, right? And in the meantime, we're working also on 0.9, where some changes might be bigger. Again, the point is offer bug stability, not API stability. So maybe for version 0.9, the packed struct API will change slightly. Maybe one keyword will change. So the point is, we want to start offering some kind of stability, but we don't want to hinder ourselves in terms of flexibility when it comes to design. Another big step that we know we want to have is the package manager, so that people can start writing packages and depend on each other more easily than it's currently possible. And that also comes with, I think, writing more of the network stuff in the standard library. After that, I don't know, to be honest, but the point is we're going to reach 1.0 when the design part of Zig is complete, basically. So it's not gonna be anytime soon, I think. It takes time, right? It always takes a while for languages to reach there. And I think in the case of Zig, we can all see that Andrew has made a lot of changes when it comes to design. And I personally have great trust in him to always move towards a progressively better solution, but sometimes those changes have to be drastic, and you can have both things, right? It's either stability or being able to fix any design mistake that you made, or making design improvements. I personally love the idea that we can make design improvements without having to worry about stability. But at the same time, I think that there is a space for early adopters, maybe like Jens, for companies that are willing to be early adopters, that they know what they're doing, they're willing to take on some burden when it comes to having to refresh their code when a new release of Zig comes out. But at the same time, I understand that right now, as Firefox, I think, pointed out earlier with a question, sometimes, yeah, CodeGen is not what you would expect. There are some bugs. We want to start fixing the thing, because bugs we can fix. It's just a matter of extra effort. But also at the same time, the idea is that at that point we'll have more money, we'll be able to hire more people, so there will be more effort spent on Zig overall. And that extra effort spent on fixing bugs and making tagged releases for those fixes will be made up by having a bigger adoption, having a start of a professional adoption of Zig, so that we can move forward and have the language grow as it should. Sorry, that was a super long answer, but I hope I answered it in full. So there is no full roadmap from here to 1.0. There is something that we know about the next few releases, like the major pieces. But after that, I guess it's a matter of Andrew and I guess other core contributors thinking about stuff more after the next big steps are completed. Snectron says, stage 1 is just a nightmare. And by the way, Snectron is the one person here that really likes C++. So for him to say that it's a nightmare, it means that it really has to be a nightmare. I would probably consider a well-structured C++ program a nightmare, nevertheless. But so there you have it. How many people in chat have tried to fix packed structs? Yeah, I think there's a comment for that, right? Alex, can you confirm that it's serious? Like there's a comment where there's a counter. Every time you try to fix them, you have to increase the counter. Is that correct? Oh, stage 1 isn't even very heavy on C++. I can see that. I can imagine. Well, so there are all these things that are happening. Anything else? Let me see on Discord and IRC if there's anything. No, on Discord there's always Soapstone that instead of watching Showtime is talking about RPG games. Okay. Oh, not in place. Oh, what about macros? Are there nice macros like mine? Probably not. I think Hello World would not compile yet if you had that kind of macros. Anyway, so I think that was it for me for this talk. Let me just give you a small spoiler before we leave for next Showtime. So for next Showtime, Alex Nask is going to be one speaker, and I'll do another talk, but it's going to be less of a, like today's talk was kind of structured, just a few points, not super tight and not really technical either. But next talk, I think is going to be more interesting. Numeric types in Zig, the basics, and the unrepresentable. So, yeah, stay tuned, don't miss it, and I guess see you next time.
This is how we